Hey, what's good, y'all? This is Jay here. Hope y'all are having a good weekend. So I get a lot of questions about my tone and kind of tone in general, I guess. So I thought I'd make a video to kind of clear some stuff up. So let me preface by saying if you're a new guitar player, new to like metal guitar and stuff like that, this may be a little outside of your pay grade for the time being. My best advice is always just get a cheap guitar, get a cheap amp, learn the basics, sort of get a feel for everything. And then once you decide you want to play guitar and you want to stick with it, that's when you can start moving up in terms of gear. But I'll do a quick rundown of what I'm using. So this is really old Line 6 software. This is a Pod Farm, and I just have a little tone port box, so it connects to my computer via USB, and then I can plug my mic and my guitar into it. So this is basically my rig in real life. So this is, they call it a criminal. It's based off a 5150 6505 PV head. So we'll start here. This is kind of the centerpiece of the tone. So on an actual 6505, you do not want to run it at 9 drive. I'm doing this because that's how you get the tone that I want out of it. In real life, these amps run really hot, so you can keep this. I keep it at about 3 or 4. And then the EQ, usually a 666, 656. Gets you a nice balanced tone. Some people like to scoop the mids. I think it sounds kind of funny, at least for like a modern metal sound. Presence here. On the real 6505, you have presence and resonance. So presence, the best way I can describe it, the presence is like the sparkliness of your high end, and then your resonance is sort of like the meatiness of your low end. And then I have the volume cranked here. Again, your amp would probably explode, or your house would cave in if you played at this volume. So this is the main event right here. And then to get the crispiness, like a little of the compression, tube screamer. This is basically what I have. I have a TS9 Ibanez tube screamer. That's what this is based off of. Your drive is basically, think of it as using like 100% of the pedal. And then the gain will do what gain does. It'll break it up. You do not want to put this too high if using it at all, because you will get some wicked feedback. And then tone, it's kind of like one side is like more bassy, the other side is more trebly. Again, this is a modeling software. It's not entirely accurate. And then for your cabinet, any 4x12 by any decent company will do it. This is a tread plate. This is based off of Mesa Boogie 4x12, which is very popular in the metal world. I use a Randall cab in real life. As long as it's like a half decent cabinet, you should be good to go. 4x12, 2x12 if you don't need like the whole shebang. I like having a full half stack, so I go for a 4x12. The microphone stuff isn't really pertinent here. It's really more for recording. Basically, on axis means it's perpendicular to the amp, and then you can move it back or forth depending on how close you want the mic in recording. Your compressor, I don't use one of these in real life. It just adds some like extra grit to the tone, I guess. But yeah, think of it's like a stress ball. If your tone is like a stress ball and you squeeze it, it just tightens things up and makes it a little better sounding. And then noise gate, I don't know what this one is. I use a Boss NS2 noise suppressor in real life. And normally, this is just how I have it set up. The way I run it in real life, I'll have a tuner pedal right here. Your tube screamer, your overdrive, you'll hear those both used. And then noise suppressor, so you have a somewhat clean signal going into the amp, and then goes to the 4x12. And you'll hear the term tube screamer. So basically, this is a tube amp. It has vacuum tubes in the back. I'm not an electrical engineer. I don't really understand kind of the dynamics of it, but basically the tube screamer pushes a hotter tone into it, makes the tubes run hotter, gives you just kind of like a hotter tone. So yeah, that's my setup for now. Again, don't put drive this high on a real 6505. Do not put the volume that high on a 6505. Your speaker will blow up. Your amp will probably blow up if you put this high. But I'll just kind of go and show you. So I have my guitar on my lap. I'll go and show you what each of these things kind of does for those who are curious. So I can turn all these off and on, this little power button here. So I'll go ahead and show you what each of these sounds like with and without. So there's a little feedback on mine. It's just I run it hot and I don't want to cut out too much of what's going on with the noise gate. But so we'll turn this off. Go to our tube screamer. And so this is what the amp sounds like without. So this is my tone. Would help to plug in the guitar. There we go. Alright. So here's the tone. So nice and high gain, compressed, everything. Here it is with Tube Screamer off. You see how it's kind of like woofy and a little inflated, I guess you could say. I don't, however you want to describe that. But then when you turn it on, so with it off, so it adds a little compression and brightens, not brighten, but adds more gain to it. If I were to turn the compressor on, off, it doesn't make a huge difference. That's going to be loud for some of y'all, I apologize. Compresses it, takes some of the volume out, and then the noise gate, I apologize y'all, this is going to be really bad, but here it goes. This is what high gain amps sound like without noise suppression. So it's annoying, and so the way this works when you're not playing, like when a signal's not running through this thing, it just mutes everything. But then when you play and the signal comes through, it recognizes that and it just lets it all come out. So it doesn't necessarily damage your tone at all or take anything away from it. It's just there. So if you're listening to this through like a iPhone or whatever, or PC headphones, it's not too bad. I mean, it's annoying as hell for sure, but now imagine this live. So you have this thing cranked up hot, running through a 4x12, and then a microphone in front of it. So there is a lot of room for this to get really noisy. So if you don't have a noise suppressor and you're playing live, it's going to be very noticeable. It's going to be really annoying and distracting. And yeah, you just kind of want as clean and as tight of a tone as possible. Especially when you're running a tube screamer into a pretty high gain amp to begin with. Don't worry about this stuff. This is my microphone settings. But generally speaking, like for the stuff that I do, modern thrash metal, metalcore, you know, your Lamb of God, As I Lay Dying, Trivium, The Hired Is Murder, whatever you listen to, it's going to be some variation of this. So a lot of bands have gone digital, which I'm not a huge fan of. I think like the digital stuff is modeling after this, so you can do that and it makes life a lot easier, to be fair. So if you're, you know, touring in Europe or wherever you happen to live, you go to Australia or South America, hauling all this shit around is a nightmare, especially the tube amp, those tubes are not cheap and they're somewhat fragile. So they break, and you know how airport baggage handlers are, like they don't give a shit. So it's easier with the digital ones. If you guys know what a rack mount is, you can just, it's like a little, it almost looks like a DVD player. It's like this little box and you just bolt it into your rack, and then it's there, and you get all this stuff in a tiny little DVD player box. But I like the OG way of doing things with the tube amp and everything. But there'll be some variation of this. So like when I was growing up mid 2000s with metalcore and stuff, As I Lay Dying, Lamb of God, Trivium, August Burns Red, this was kind of the standard rig. So you have a tube amp of some sort, 6505, 5150, a lot of Mesa Boogie, some Marshall. Marshall wasn't that popular. It's a little on the bright end, and it kind of, I don't know, it has like a more classic thrash metal sound, like Metallica, Megadeth, that kind of tone. So it works, but it's not quite there. And then of course, with these being tube amps, run a tube screamer in front of it to really like make it spicy, like really get the most out of the tubes. And then 4x12, 2x12, you'll see guys using Mesa Boogies, really popular, orange cabs, Randall's kind of falling out of style. I still use a Randall, it sounds good. EVH cabs, if you have money for that kind of stuff. And then the boutique amps, you saw some of that too, like the Hughes and Kettner, Bogner, Soldano, Engel. Really expensive boutique amps, but they basically the same thing. 6505 is basically in my opinion, is the bread and butter of metal, modern metal. You can get one used, which I did for like $600, $500. But that was like 15 years ago, so with inflation, who knows. But get that, your 4x12 from a reputable manufacturer, should be good to go. And then, yeah, your noise suppressor. So there's, I use the Boss one, NS2. There's a ISP decimator. They all kind of function the same. But that's sort of the basics of getting a solid metal tone. And when it comes to guitars, I guess the most important aspect would be what pickups you're using. Some people like active pickups, your EMGs, I think Seymour Duncan makes one. I know the Fishmans are popular now. I don't really have much experience, but I prefer passive pickups. Because passive technology has come a long way. You can get really high gain signals out of them. And then I don't really like active pickups because they're battery powered, and like all battery powered things, especially music related, when that battery starts to die, so does your tone and signal. And I just hate having to have batteries on hand and stuff, especially when passive pickups sort of get it done. But yeah. So your pickups, you can get really good passive ones. I use Seymour Duncan. Some people use bare knuckle, more expensive. You can probably find custom made ones from different companies. But yeah, just a high output pickup, passive or active. A lot of people like EMGs, the 81s, 85, 60s. And then guess the other thing I like about passive pickups is it allows the wood of your guitar to come out. So like the way an active pickup works, it just kind of takes the vibration, EQs it, like polishes it, I guess, levels it out, and then sends it to your amp. And I mean, you could basically take a piece of plywood from the beach or a driftwood and stick an active pickup on it, and you can make it sound good. Whereas with a passive pickup, just the way it's a more organic, natural way of getting your tone, I guess. So my guitars are mahogany with like maple necks. Mahogany has like a really rich, like deep lower end to it, and it really comes out with good passive pickups. So yeah, I mean, A cheap guitar with cheap passive pickups is going to sound cheap. A cheap guitar with decent active pickups will sound good. But I think if you can get a nice guitar made out of nice wood, with good passive pickups, you're good to go. And that's about it. Like, every guitar player has their little nuances, their own little things. And then, of course, if you play in a band with two guitarists, you're going to want to kind of work together with each other and try to get two tones that complement each other. You don't want two guitarists fighting for the same sonic space, if that makes sense. Usually your rhythm guitar player will have more low end, more low mids. Your lead guitar player will have more higher end, because you want that to cut through when you're playing leads and solos. You want that high end to really shine through. And that's about it. The other big part about tone is your actual playing. So your hands. I see, and this is not to like knock anybody, I see a lot of people play metal very gently, and that comes through in your tone. It's hard to explain without, like, I don't know, pulling up examples, but like the harder you pick, the more force your tone is going to have. So I can just like gently alternate pick. Get that abrasiveness. If you're doing riffs, I can play it lightly. Whereas if you pick hard, you get more punch, you know. So yeah, it's just kind of a combination of things. Again, this is more for when you're in the ballpark of, I guess, streaming or recording like I do, and then playing live shows. You'll definitely want like a half decent setup. This is the OG like tube amp setup. Again, you can get amp modeling. What are they called? Axe effects. Line 6s get shit on a lot. You can get good tones out of a line 6 if you know what you're doing, like how to get the right amp model and get the tone set right. But this is my tone. This is, it's hard to say nowadays. 15 years ago, this was every metalcore band, every hardcore band, anybody using like really gritty, kind of compressed metal tones that you hear a lot. And yeah, that's it. If y'all have any other questions, let me know. Happy to answer. Cheers, y'all. Take care.